everybody, and welcome to Friday Apocryphal Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything Friday Apocryphal and podcast. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today we are covering Judith, chapters 4 through 7.
And I think this is everything up until the point that Judith shows up.
Right, because Judith shows up in chapter 8, and we won't be covering chapter 8 today, but we're going to be covering everything else.
Yeah, this wonderful and happy little war story that they have going on.
Oh, it's great. We got this nice history lesson about this war story. Classic stuff.
I'm just waiting for this beheading scene.
Oh, aren't we all?
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'll be honest with you, finding background images for anything that isn't the beheading scene is very difficult.
I could have just used the opening to Skyrim. Let's start with that.
With the beheading scene?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm looking for specifically not beheading scene.
Technically, they start with a carriage scene that goes into a beheading scene. So
either way, I'm not going to use a Skyrim background.
Yeah, we could just do the entire opening to Skyrim on loop.
Yeah, as a background. You want me to get on that?
I mean,
I'll get on it.
I understand we could do that.
I'll just play Skyrim and put it in the background. Is it better than this? It might be.
I know this one's not too great.
I bet this war story is less of a letdown than the Civil War story in Skyrim.
Yeah, the Civil War story in Skyrim is a huge letdown.
Yep.
All right. Well, before we hop into the readings, what translation do you have there?
Well, I have the Anchor Bible, Judith, a new translation with introduction and commentary by Carrie A. Moore,
who also wrote the one on Tobit.
Yes.
From Anchor Bible.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one that we had on this show.
Yeah, and it was a good version.
Yeah, good version, good commentary. Really not much to say. Very solid.
Really so great.
It's solid. I mean,
well, most books.
Sorry, are you gonna say are solid?
Yeah.
Physically solid.
They are.
What is with your literalism today?
Well, I mean, you're using language. You might as well.
Oh my God!
Use it accurately.
Stop. And oh my God, I forgot to change the quote.
Damn it, Lawrence!
Yeah, I know.
That was you.
I should have done that. But you know what? Let's talk about some of these upcoming chapters here. So I actually have the New Interpreter's Bible Commentary, Volume 6, and this section on Judith was written by some person whose name I can quickly find, Lawrence Mills.
It's Will's.
Oh, that's right. Didn't we get that messed up?
Yeah.
You got that one messed up last time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Apologize to Lawrence.
All right. Lawrence, I'm sorry.
There you go.
So, and we also have Erdman's commentary on the Bible. And those are the commentaries we have aside from the commentary and translation.
I mean, we have commentaries on other things.
Well, on Judith specifically, that we will be using today.
Indeed. So, without further ado, let's hop into chapter 4. Yeah. You have anything to say about chapter 4?
I do have something on chapter 4. So, this quotation is from Schuler in 1992. Quote, throughout the first 3 chapters, the reader is overwhelmed with the seemingly invincible power of Nebuchadnezzar and his general Holofernes. One by one, all the nations are destroyed or submit as vassals, leaving Judea to face the Assyrian giant alone. End quote. The focus now shifts to Judea, and also remains on Judea for the remainder of the narrative. World events recede into the background. So I guess now it's starting to be a bit more focused.
All right. Well, then let's hop into it. Chapter 4. Now, this section is called Israel's Reaction to Holofernes' Threatened Invasion of Judea. And in the Vulgate, this is 1 through 16, and the rest of the civilized world, it's 1 through 15. So,
civilized.
Yeah. When the Israelites living in Judea heard of how Holofernes, the ranking commander of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, had treated the nations, sacking and destroying their sanctuaries, they were terrified at his approach and alarmed for Jerusalem and the temple of the Lord their God. For they had returned from exile only a short time before, and all the people of Judea had been reunited, and the sacred utensils, the altar and the temple, had just recently been rededicated after they had been defiled.
So, before we, continue on with all the utensils in the temple, before we get into that whole discussion again.
Geez, these things again?
So the term Israelites, in the narrow sense, applied to inhabitants of the north who were conquered by the Assyrians in 721 BCE, although the term also communicates the ideal self-image of both Jews and Sumerians. Samaria was the resettled capital and the province of the old northern kingdom, which we remember reading about. The mixed ethnic and religious makeup of that region was a source of friction with the Jews of Jerusalem, and this friction had boiled over into conflicts on a number of occasions. John Hyrcanus, who ruled Jerusalem from 135 to 104, finally subdued Samaria and destroyed the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim. This did not end hostilities between Jews and Samaritans, as the New Testament indicates, but it did place control of Samaria in Jewish hands. Unlike the other cities of the region, the Samaritan cities and Judea do not seek terms of peace, but brace for war. It is indeed surprising that Samaria is portrayed so positively, essentially in alliance with Judea. It is possible, as Moore suggests, that the positive view of Samaria indicates that Judith was written after Samaria was annexed, rather than before, when tensions might have been high. And that's pages 67 through 70 in that book.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to pull something up or something, I don't know. Other scholars have argued that the annexation would hardly improve relations, but only pacify the resistance. But the author probably romanticized the notion of a united Israel, as David and Solomon had constituted it. And this common clause of Samaria and Judea reflects that.
Yeah, that 67 through 70 is the entire section on the date of the book.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
Yeah.
We already went over that.
Yeah.
The Book of Judith may represent a fictionalized and romanticized version of what John Hyrcanus enforced by the sword. Despite the ambiguity of the geographical term Israel, from this point on it will dominate as the common designation for the defenders of Bethulia and Jerusalem.
You know those citations where they're like, this book, this version, on this page, in this paragraph, in this sentence of the paragraph.
I've never seen anything past page.
This specific period at the end of this sentence.
Sometimes when they're referencing Plato in different literature.
Oh, sure. Well, that one's broken up into lines.
They'll break it down into like paragraphs and like sentences within paragraphs.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess for more modern books, you don't really see that.
Yeah. So let's talk about returning from the exile for a short time before. For the ancient author to have established the general historical period for the events of his story by saying that it happened a short time after the return, i.e. shortly after 538 BC, and just recently after the reconsecration of the temple, i.e. sometime after 515 BC, it's very curious, especially since elsewhere in his account the author offers an extended yet reasonably coherent history of his people. Thus, unless one regards these two phrases as a momentary lapse of the author's memory, a view which the present writer finds unpersuasive, then the easiest and most probable explanation is that the entire verse is an early gloss. Such a view is somewhat confirmed by the fact that the Vulgate omits this verse.
Which one?
This is verse 3.
Verse 3, okay.
but not the verse preceding or following it, regardless of who was initially responsible for it. Scholars generally agree that the passage was influenced by the account of Judas Maccabeus' cleansing of the temple. However, Enslin regards the mentions of the return and reconsecration of the temple as just stage properties for the author's story.
Yeah, they actually note that in here too. One may wonder why verse 3 was added, since it calls attention to the historical problems and hardly adds information necessary for the reader's understanding of the narrative. Regardless of how clumsy it seems, it has been taken as evidence for a Persian-era dating for Judith, since it states that the Israelites had only recently returned. However, it is probably not a direct reference to the return from the Babylonian exile, but reverberates with the experience of the audience, who, after the Maccabean revolt, had also only recently rededicated the temple. Note especially the reference to the sacred vessels and the altar and the temple, which had been consecrated after their profanation.
I mean, when did Nebuchadnezzar die?
No, I mean, it was like this story takes place at a different time than it was written in.
Yeah, well, I understand that.
Nebuchadnezzar died like
prior to the end of the exile?
Yes, prior to the end of the exile.
Okay, so there you go.
Yeah.
There he was also not king of the Assyrians.
Right. which we did cover.
So, look, the story takes place
Actually,
in an alternate history.
How many Nebuchadnezzars
alternate
were
reality. What?
I'm trying to remember how many Nebuchadnezzars were there. There was at least 2.
Well, there was Nebuchadnezzar, and there was
No, that's a different guy. I'm talking like, you know how there's like first and second.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like how many? That's what I'm asking. I can remember
in one
2.
of the books we had a king's list. I think that was. Oh man, it was one of the Anchor Bible books. I think.
I don't remember the king's list. Like
Yeah.
the Persian king's list, or not the Persian one, the Babylonian king's list.
Yeah, it had like a whole king's list of multiple different areas, actually.
I don't remember that.
I pointed it out to you. I just don't remember what book it was
Right.
in.
Right.
Anyways, let's continue. So they alerted all the territory of Samaria, Kona, Beth Horon, Belmain, Jericho, Choba, Aasura, and the valley of Salem. They went ahead and secured all the summits of the high hills, fortified the villages on them, and stored up their food in preparation for war, for their fields had just been harvested. Joachim, the high priest who was in Jerusalem at that time, wrote to those living in Bethulia and Bethomesthaim, which is opposite Esdraelon, facing the plain near Dathan, telling them to occupy the passes up to the hill country, because access into Judea was through them, and it would be easy to prevent an army from entering, for the approach was only wide enough for 2 men at a time to pass. Yeah, talk about... I mean, that's pretty tight, right? Some of these locations are unknown. Kona is unknown. Belmain is unknown.
Yeah. This is because when we first started talking about this book, I pointed out that while there were plenty of places that were well known, others were not known at all.
Or fictional.
Yeah.
But
as far as we can tell.
Choba is unknown. Aasura is unknown. The Valley of Salem is unknown. Regardless of the actual locations of the various places mentioned above, the favorable attitude towards Samaritans evidenced here and elsewhere in Judith deserves comment. Since the collapse of the northern kingdom in 721 BC, the relations between Judeans and those living in the territory of Samaria had been less than cordial. Possibly Samaritans were too hostile towards Jews for the people of Jerusalem to have warned them of an approaching pagan army, let alone to have counted on them to defend Jerusalem and its temple. However, relations may have changed somewhat for the better after John Hyrcanus I had annexed all the territory of Samaria having taken Shechem and having destroyed the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim by 107 BC. However, Dancy, they do this thing where they like put it in as a source and then they do comma, however, instead of just saying Dancy, however, they like.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Thinks that Samaria may have been added by a later copyist so as to give the reader the impression that the area was under Jewish domination. So, there you go, guys. Bunch of basically fictional places.
At least some of them, probably. That's as far as we can tell.
And some of these have different translations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Different readings. The Israelites did as they had been ordered by the high priest Joachim and the council of all the people of Israel in session at Jerusalem. Most fervently they cried out to God, every man of Israel, and they humbled themselves with much fasting. So, wow. They put on sackcloth, they and their wives and children, their cattle, every resident alien, and every hired or purchased servant. All the Israelite men, women, and children living in Jerusalem prostrated themselves before the temple and put ashes on their head and spread out their sackcloth before the Lord. They even draped the altar with sackcloth, and with one voice they cried out to the God of Israel, fervently begging that he not allow their children to be carried off, or their women raped, or the towns of their heritage destroyed, or the temple profaned and reviled to the malicious delight of the heathen. So the Lord heard their prayers and looked kindly on their distress. For many days, the people throughout Judea and Jerusalem kept on fasting before the sanctuary of the omnipotent Lord. Now, that's a name for God that we haven't.
Omnipotent Lord? I mean, we've, come across stuff that's similar to that, approaching that. Or maybe that's just a translation thing.
Yeah, let me see.
Which verse?
That's verse 13.
Oh, verse 13.
Occurring in Judith here and in 8:13, 15:10, and 16:5, Kurio Pantokratoros is used in the Septuagint to translate both Yahweh, Lord Sabaoth, i.e. Lord of Hosts, and Shaddai. So that's the term that's used.
So let me look at the Greek, actually.
It's not Greek.
Well, it's you just read off a bunch of definitely Greek words.
Yeah, it's transliterated Greek. So
yeah, okay. So Kuriou, oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so I guess I am not sure what the last part of that means, but of the Lord, or of a Lord. Okay, so it means like all of something is of the Lord.
Say all knowledge or something, some shit like that.
Or it's like completely encompassing or something. Each, every. That's what the root of panto is.
Yeah. Wearing sackcloth around their loins, Joachim the high priest and all the priests who officiated before the Lord and those who ministered to the Lord offered the regular burnt offering, the votive, and the voluntary offerings of the people with ashes on their turbans. They cried to the Lord with all their might to look favorably on the whole house of Israel. Man, that is like the exact opposite of what happens in Jeremiah during the...
Yeah, that's true. So the inheritance in verse 12 is the land of Israel as a promise from God, right? Classic Exodus stuff. This is perhaps more evidence that the author affirms a notion of an ideal Israel It is surprising that the readers are told in verse 13 that the Lord heard their prayers, since this is precisely the question that the residents of Bethulia must grapple with in chapter 7. I guess we'll get to that later today. The dramatic tension, therefore, would seem to be lessened by this intimation that all will be well. The tension about whether the Jews will be saved does not seem to be a strong factor in the reader's interest, however. The tension appears to build around how Judith will risk her dignity and keep it at, well, we don't really know about Judith yet, but still, will risk her dignity and keep it at the same time in order to save her people. The book of Judges also states that God heard the cries of the Israelites and sent them deliverers. In the introduction of this text, it is noted that Judith is like one of the judges, and I think I covered that. The fact that she was like one of the judges.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So yeah, it goes. I mean, that's pretty much the whole note, honestly. That's all the important stuff about those last few verses there. So unless you have
I have a comment here that I'm not sure adds anything, but the wording. If the religious threads of this episode and the story are quite strong and distinct, the episode's total design is weakened and blurred, at least for many informed readers, by its anachronisms and geographical imprecisions. However, just as all but the most informed and persnickety modern person can read
persnickety?
Yes.
Persnickety.
Can read a historical novel about the American Civil War or some other fascinating and complex period without having the novel's anachronisms and imprecisions detract appreciably from his or her enjoyment of it. So, presumably, the ancient readers were not too distracted by the difficulties we have just pointed out. Or, put it another way, if biblical books did not lay claim to being historical, as well as being religious in character, then most modern readers would probably give scant attention to the question of the historicity or accuracy of the events and persons described in the stories themselves. Though I'll note that biblical books make no claims about being either religious or historical. It's people who base their religious traditions off of biblical books who make claims about the books being religious or historical.
Well, I would say that it depends. Like, there are some texts that go out of their way to be religious.
I think pretty much, except for Esther.
Okay, well, Esther is, fairly, it doesn't include God, but, I think the point was that, God is supposed to be behind these things.
It's still pretty religious. I'm pretty sure basically every single book.
Psalms, the whole point of Psalms is that it is religious. The nature of the book is religious.
No, the point of Psalms is to be poetry, man.
Religious poetry.
You gotta be like Salah.
Oh my
Wow.
Just imagine all the
and
all
although
the Jewish people with little goatees with their curly cues,
drinking
coffee.
Why?
Okay.
Why?
Yeah.
We just watched what are they called? The Maccabees.
Yeah, the Maccabees.
It's a band, if you want to call it that, that did a very I hope on purpose horrible rendition of what's it called? Dayenu?
It's difficult to make a good rendition of a bad song, Lawrence.
I suppose.
Yeah.
But I hope this was supposed to be worse on purpose.
Okay, so this next chapter, which you're gonna read,
Yeah.
because that's the end of chapter 4.
Yeah.
Chapter 4 is done. We're done with chapter 4. It's over. You don't no more chapter 4. It's gone.
Make sure you drop a like, subscribe if you haven't. It all helps us out a lot.
Yep.
The likes really do help us out.
So this next chapter, you're gonna read this, and then there's one paragraph in the next section.
Gotcha. Okay. So here's some commentaries. So I don't know if you have anything to. I guess if you find something that you want to add to the commentary,
something I want to add.
Yeah, from the commentary.
You know what?
I mean, I can just start the reading.
We're going to be talking about Holofernes here.
Yeah, so this section titled Achior, the Ammonite, Reviews for Holofernes, the Religious History of the Jews.
This is an officer in the Assyrian army.
Okay.
Achior.
Or just in here, Ammonite is what they're using.
Yeah, he is an Ammonite, but he's an officer in the Assyrian army.
Okay.
They also have Assyrian in quotes.
Oh, all right. All right, let's hop into this. Chapter 5. When it was reported to Holofernes, the ranking commander of the Assyrian forces, that the Israelites had prepared for war, and that they had closed the mountain passes, garrisoned all the high hilltops, and laid traps in the plains, he was furious. Summoning all the rulers of Moab, and the generals of Ammon, and all the governors of the coastal region, that part is sectioned off here. It says that the Septuagint and the Old Latin omit it. Actually, that and all the governors of the coastal region. He said to them, "Now tell me, you Canaanites, who is this people that lives in the hill country? What towns do they inhabit? How big is their army? In what does their strength or power consist? Who is their king? Who commands their army?" That's section 2. Who commands their army is omitted in the Septuagint and the Syriac.
So
I'm just going to finish the quotation here.
Yeah.
And why have they, of all the people living in the West, refused to come and meet me?
So referring to them all as Canaanites.
Yeah.
It's a bit like talking to people from Ethiopia and Nigeria and being like, Africans.
Yeah, I suppose.
But this is in reference to the Ammonites and the Moabites. The Moabites and the Ammonites are on his side. Presumably, just as other nations succumbed to the fear of the Assyrians, so did the Moabites and the Ammonites. They had a very mixed history of relations with Israel and fought on the side of the historical Nebuchadnezzar against Jerusalem. More recently, the Maccabees had fought against the Ammonites. One tradition, Deuteronomy 23:3-6, had emphasized the distinction between Israel and these neighbors and excludes them and their descendants from entry into the assembly of the Lord. So the reference of Canaanites is probably pejorative.
Yeah. It definitely would be. Actually, John Van Setters brings that up as well, that at some point it was just used as a pejorative. But the thing is, from the work of people like Van Setters and also Francesca Stavrakopoulou, we already kind of know now that Canaanite is not like it wasn't an actual thing. It was just like a word used by the early Israelites to say like these people over here that were before us. It doesn't refer to any specific ethnic group or even a specific culture. Like these people did not call themselves Canaanites. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. Like
it was a much later
Native Americans.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And so the series of questions which Holofernes asks does not convey a realistic picture of what a military strategist might ask, and the Jewish audience would already know the answers. However, they serve a dramatic function in pointing to the larger themes that will dominate the book. The questions move in a progression from those that are immediate, concrete, and realistic, e.g., how large is their army, to broader issues that are also capable of double meanings, e.g., in what does their power and strength consist. The final questions point to a reflection on the ultimate theological and ethical affirmations of Israel. Who rules over them as king? Why have they alone refused to come out and meet me? The reader would naturally see these as theological questions with an answer that sets Israel apart from other nations, that God is their king, and this allegiance precludes the reverence of any other king. Holofernes will ask about worldly...
To verse 5. Then Achior,
Yes!
leader of the Ammonites, said to him, "May my lord please listen to the advice of your servant. I will tell you the truth about this people living in the hill country near here. Nothing false shall come from your servant's mouth.
So
I won't lie to you."
yeah, the truth
I'm
and
not
nothing
gonna lie.
but the truth.
Definitely not gonna lie.
But we have a little bit of a callback here. If you remember that other book that Carrie A. Moore translated, Tobit.
Yes, Tobit.
Although various derivations and meanings for Achior's name have been suggested, such as the Hebrew, "light is my brother," it is almost certainly the case that it is a slightly altered form of Ahikar. In the ancient Near Eastern story of Ahikar, Ahikar is an Assyrian court advisor who is falsely accused, imprisoned, and marked for execution, but who is later vindicated to save the kingdom through his wise counsel. A version of the story dating from about 400 BCE was found among the texts of a Jewish military colony at Elephantine in Egypt, and we find that Ahikar was easily adapted to new ethnic roles. He was a Jewish courtier in Tobit, and his story is assimilated into Aesop in Greek tradition. Although in Judith he has become an Ammonite general and is not described as the wise man of tradition, it would be wrong to conclude that he cannot be modeled on Ahikar the Wise, just as Judith was a woman of action. So also Achior must be treated heroically, must be depicted as a man of action. Ahikor's conversion is also prompted by the needs of the story. As a wise and brave man, he must naturally, in this novel, come to see the truth about God that's revealed in Israelite history. He embodied the type of the righteous Gentile, such as Balaam in Numbers 22 through 24, Rahab in Joshua 2 through 6, and Naaman in 2 Kings 5. And like the first of these, he places himself in danger by uttering true words, one might almost say prophecies about the Israelites.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, so a lot of that stuff is noted in Moore's commentary as well. A lot of the possibilities for the translation, like "light is my divine brother," and of course the note there about Ahikar, the corruption of the name. Let's see, according to D.N. Friedman, I think it's David Noel Friedman, Achior can even be interpreted to mean "the sun god is my divine brother," which would be appropriate for a Yahwist, since Yahweh is identified as the sun god in Psalm 19.
Oh, yeah.
Or as although that was not a usual identification, like there were way better and more consistent ones, I think. Like he was a war and storm god.
Yeah.
If anything.
Almost always accompanied by storm imagery.
Yeah. Or imagery of war.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you have all the battlements and stuff. Or for a Moabite such as Achior. Others, like Cowley and Steinman, taking their cue from the Syriac, regard Achior as a corruption of Ahiud, brother of Judah, as in the Septuagint of Numbers 34:27, where the Masoretic texts Ahuad is rendered Achior, the Hebrew Daleth evidently being misread as the Hebrew Resh. So yeah, those are some more possible translations.
And the difference between a Dalet and a Resh. So the Dalet is a straight line with a line coming down.
Okay.
And a Resh is a curved line with a line coming down.
Oh, all right then. So yeah, that's a classic misreading.
Yeah.
When letters just look the same. And like when they're right next to each other too.
Yeah.
That can be real bad. All right, let's continue here. These people are descended from the Chaldeans. No, they're not gonna like that. Let's see what they have to say about that. That was verse 6. Sadly, not really much on verse 6, because it was just that. At one time, they settled in Mesopotamia because they did not want to worship the gods of their ancestors who were in Chaldea. They had abandoned the ways of their ancestors and worshipped the God of heaven.
The God of heaven.
Let me just finish the thing here.
Okay.
The God of heaven, because they further identify him, the God they had come to know. When the Chaldeans drove them out from the presence of their gods, they fled to Mesopotamia and settled there for a long while.
So the God of heaven was used by Jews during the Persian period and later. See Tobit 10:11 and Ezra 1:2.
Settled in Mesopotamia, for example, in Haran of northern Mesopotamia. So Nehemiah 9:7. And then gods of their ancestors who are in Chaldea. The who evidently refers to the ancestors, but the Syriac and the Vulgate add were worshipped, thereby making the pronoun refer to the gods. So that's interesting. Yeah, just talked about God of heaven. This expression was common in Persian times, and then it references a whole bunch of texts. All right, let's continue on here. So, yeah, apparently they were being driven out, and because they didn't worship the gods of their ancestors. And this is, of course, being told by Achior. Later, their God told them to leave the place where they were staying and go to the land of Canaan. So they settled there and accumulated much wealth in gold, silver, and livestock. Obviously, passing over some narrative here, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Talking about Abraham. God said to Abraham, "Kill me a son." Abe said, "Man, you must be putting me on."
What is up with you?
Nothing. I'm sitting here. What's up with you?
Okay, I'm going to continue. So they brought back a whole bunch of stuff. When a famine spread over the land of Canaan, they went down to Egypt and settled there as long as there was food.
They did not.
Well,
in fact, they settled there. The land went into famine, and
they specifically
managed the famine.
Right.
I mean, how do you define?
Well, that's how
as long as there was food.
Right. I mean, so as long as you weren't out of food. So I would say that, because they stored up all this food, they had food.
I guess
they weren't. Yeah, so they weren't.
It wasn't like their food. It was food for Egyptians that was being given out by the state, like
right during the
they
famine.
had a whole management system.
They did,
going
yes.
on.
But either way, there they became so numerous that it was impossible to count them. As numerous as the stars.
No, I don't think so, because David.
Yeah, that was bad.
He
that
takes place afterwards.
Yeah, that was bad. He shouldn't have counted them.
He counts them.
That was bad, David. Come on. So the king of Egypt turned against them and exploited them by forcing them to make bricks. He degraded them by making them slaves, but they cried out to their God, and he afflicted all the lands of Egypt with incurable plagues. So the Egyptians expelled them. Man, this is a lot of, just little bits here and there is a lot of, rewriting of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. It's a little bit wrong.
And of all the apocryphal stories where they retell the stories of Genesis and Exodus, this is very compact.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost as if the other authors should have, taken the hint. Although this was written much later. Depends on the text.
So
Then,
the agreement, the view expressed in the contemporary Greek historians on Jewish history. So,
and apparently, I mean, you can finish your notes. Sorry.
yeah, the technique of putting into the mouths of Gentiles some of the anti-Jewish prejudices of the time is also utilized in the additions to Esther 13, where the content of Haman's anti-Jewish decree, lacking in Masoretic text Esther, is given in a very plausible way. There is a further dramatic function of Achior's speech here. Found in his introduction, he tells Holofernes, I will tell you the truth about this people. No falsehood shall come from your servant's mouth. Since Achior and Judith will become partnered in the narrative as the only two people brave enough to stand up to Holofernes, Achior's words here evoke a comparison with Judith's words at 11:5.
I see.
There she's going to offer the same assurances, but she will be lying.
Oh.
Which is breaking one of the Ten
Oh,
Commandments.
no.
Oh,
Lying.
oh, no.
How could you? So 12 through 14, that's the little, okay, so I guess I'm almost done with that section, actually. Once I'm done with 14, I'll get to the note.
Okay.
Then God dried up the Red Sea for them and led them by the way of Sinai and Kadesh Barnea. They drove out all the inhabitants of the desert. So that was verse 14. So
That's not exactly how the Red Sea thing worked.
right. But of course, this is a very, very abridged version.
Yeah.
So here, the Vulgate offers an expanded version, which may very well be based on the Chaldean manuscript used by Jerome. So this is why we have those extra verses in the Vulgate. This is an expansion of what there was before. So would you like me to read the expanded version?
Mm-hmm.
So this is in the Vulgate 5:12 through 15. The God of heaven opened the sea to them in their flight, so that the waters were made to stand firm as a wall on either side, and they walked through the bottom of the sea and passed it dry foot. And when an innumerable army of the Egyptians pursued after them in that place, they were so overwhelmed with the waters that there was not one left to tell what had happened to posterity. And after they came out of the Red Sea, they abode in the deserts of Mount Sinai, in which never man could dwell, or son of man rested. There, bitter fountains were made sweet for them to drink, and for 40 years they received food from heaven. So a lot of additions there.
Yeah.
More of a rehash of stuff we've gone over 150 times now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the whole biblical tradition.
Repeat everything. I mean, it's in keeping with, lots of stuff that
Yeah.
Why do they always have to repeat everything? Okay. Either way. So they drove out all the inhabitants of the desert and lived in the land of the Amorites. So strong were they that they destroyed all the Heshbonites, and crossing the Jordan, they took possession of all the hill country, driving out before them the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Shechemites, and all Girgashites.
What verse was that?
That's verse 16.
So the list of 5 nations in verse 16 is an abbreviation of the usual list of 6 nations. Exodus 3:8, Joshua 9:1, Judges 3:5, or 7 nations that are to be conquered, even wiped out in the conquest of Canaan. Deuteronomy 7:1 through 2, Joshua 3:10. Shechemites does not appear in the older lists. Shechem was a Samaritan city captured by John Hyrcanus I. Shechemites may be included here to show that they were a people conquered as part of the conquest, or because Judith in 9:2 will invoke the revenge of Simeon and Levi on Shechem for the rape of Dinah.
Oh yeah, do you remember that story?
Yeah.
Yeah, very.
Did they, like kill that guy or forgive him or something. It was weird.
It was a messed up
It
story.
was a messed up story.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much else that I can add. You pretty much hit on and all the stuff, the list of places there. Yeah, that was pretty much all of it.
Tell me when you get to the end of verse 19.
Got it. So there they settled for a long while. And as long as they did not sin against their God, they prospered. For theirs is a God who hates wrongdoing. But when they abandoned the path he had laid down for them, they were devastated in many battles and were carried off as captives to a foreign land. The temple of their God was leveled to the ground, and their towns were occupied by the enemies. But now that they have returned to their God, they have come back from the places where they had been scattered. They have regained Jerusalem, where their sanctuary is, and have reoccupied the hill country because it was uninhabited.
Is that 19?
That was verse 19.
Okay, so the
Funny
dude
thing, by the way, Lawrence, your shirt looks fine most of the time, but it is green.
Yeah. Yeah,
It looks fine because the background is green.
I suppose.
But when we change camera angles, yeah.
Gotcha.
Isn't that funny?
So the Deuteronomic theology is stated clearly in verses 17 through 19 with the perspective of hindsight. The fall of Israel and Judah is directly laid to the sins of the people, although the entire focus is on the fall of Judah only. Jeremiah reflects this theology as well, Jeremiah 26 to 35. But he lived at the center of the crisis and counseled an adjustment on the part of the defeated people to the effects of their sins. Texts such as Daniel 1 through 6 likewise indicate an attempt to understand life in exile. But verse 19 indicates a different period in Jewish religious life, a realized goal of life in God's temple city. It likely represents the heady, aggressive policy of the Hasmonean rulers some years after the Maccabean revolt and the rededication of the temple. The historical impossibility of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, is made glaringly obvious here. The events described, deportation and destruction of the temple, were accomplished by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon.
Yeah, I got nothing to add there. So, verse 20. So now, my master and Lord, if there is any oversight in this people, if they are sinning against their God and we can detect this offense among them, then we may go up and force them to fight. Weird conditions. But if this nation is not guilty, then let my Lord please bypass them, for their Lord and God will defend them, and we shall become the laughingstock of the whole world.
So Achior concludes in verses 20 through 21 by giving the counsel that in his mind is inescapable. If the people of Judea can be found to be sinning, then attack. They will surely fall. If they have not sinned, they will be invincible. The Assyrians will be routed and shamed. At this point, Achior can be seen to be the mouthpiece of unconscious prophecy, similar to the role of Balaam in Numbers 22 through 24, or of the high priest Caiaphas in John 11:47 through 53. Holofernes will also sarcastically refer to this speech in 6:2 as prophecy, though the audience knows that this is precisely what it is. Phrases in the conclusion of Achior's Ahikor. That's like a combination of Achior and Ahikar.
Yeah.
Very good.
Achior's speech, let my Lord pass by them, their Lord and God, set up the comparison between Nebuchadnezzar as Lord and God as Lord that will later be used by Judith to create a series of ironic statements that are understood in one way by Holofernes and in another way by the audience. In both cases, Achior plays the part unknowingly, addressing Holofernes with a clear meaning, while Judith will later be deliberately deceptive.
So, yeah, one thing, that was just a weird condition to go to war that we haven't heard before.
Well, the only reason why Nebuchadnezzar,
Oh.
king of Babylon, was successful in raiding Jerusalem.
Because God let him do it.
Yep. And God only let him do it because the people weren't following his orders.
Right, yeah. So obviously, but this would only be a conversation that would happen in a book like this. It wouldn't actually happen.
Right.
Because you have two people from a opposing nation. They're not gonna be like, hey, their God is really powerful. We gotta look out.
Yeah.
That's not gonna happen. All right. So Achior's speech appears to have served two purposes. It informed Holofernes of the nature and history of the Israelites, thereby making it easier for him later on to believe Judith when she explains why she has deserted her people and come over to his side. The speech also reminds the reader of the sacred history of the Jewish people as interpreted from a Deuteronomistic view. Faithfulness to God is rewarded, infidelity always punished. Classic.
Yeah.
Deuteronomic view there.
And now
right.
you have a couple of verses.
Yeah. Here's the rest of it. So verse 22. When Achior had finished saying all these things, all the people standing around the tent began muttering, and Holofernes' officers, as well as those inhabiting the coastal region and Moab, suggested thrashing him, saying, "We're not afraid of the Israelites. They're a weak people, unable to wage war. So let's go ahead, Lord Holofernes. Your army will eat them up." That is the end of the verse. But
the chapter.
Sorry, the end of chapter. Yes.
So if you're enjoying the stream so far, give us a like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, family, neighbors, invading armies.
Definitely with the invading armies. But there's a corresponding to this verse, the Vulgate on the last verse there, verse 24. So let's go ahead, Lord Holofernes. Your army will eat them up. The Vulgate adds that therefore Achior may know that he is deceiving us. Let us go up into the mountains, and when their mighty men have been taken prisoners, then let him be stabbed with a sword along with them, that every nation may know that Nebuchadnezzar is God of the earth, and besides him there is no other. So I'm guessing that is to add more to the Lord stuff that we saw before.
Mm.
Calling him master and all that.
It also makes
classic
it a
stuff.
little more, rounded out,
Yeah, I suppose.
more conditional at least.
Either way, here's the translation for you.
All right.
You might want this.
And you might want these commentaries.
I do. Thank you. All right. So let's see. We are hopping into chapter 6 then. There's not really much to say in here.
This is the part of the book with all the pictures.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, pictures are
in the commentary.
fun, I suppose.
So now that we've reached the pictures section,
Are you going to show the people the pictures?
Yep. This is present day Tel Dathan. You can see it there. It's a site mentioned in verse 3:9 and elsewhere. These are there's just different coins there.
There's a lot of coins. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of coins.
I mean,
Hey, there's a bronze statue by Donatello of they're gonna cut off Holofernes' head.
yeah. See, every piece of imagery nearly that I found for this book has been that exact scene.
Kind of like the title art of a game or movie.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yep. Here's Michelangelo.
Man, amazing.
We've got Donatello, Michelangelo.
Oh,
There's
where's the other two?
Born a lot later.
They don't have Raphael or
Donatello.
Leonardo.
Oh,
they had Donatello.
sorry, yeah,
They
Leonardo.
had
Yeah,
Donatello.
Yeah, Leonardo.
They have other people, but that
Those are the only important ones. Let's just get that out of the way.
Anyways, what do you want to say about chapter 6?
There is nothing specific about chapter 6. Once we get into verse 2, I'm gonna have some commentary though.
Okay, well, then I'll hop into chapter 6. After the hubbub of the men outside the council had died down.
Oh, this hubbub.
Yeah. Holofernes, the ranking commander of the Assyrian army, said to Achior in front of all the assembled foreigners, "So who are you, Achior, and you Ephraimite mercenaries, that you may play the prophet among us, as you have done today, advising us not to make war against the people of Israel, because their God will protect them? Who is God except Nebuchadnezzar? He will send his forces and wipe them off the face of the earth. Their God won't save them. On the contrary, we, Nebuchadnezzar's servants, will strike them down as if they were one man. They cannot withstand the strength of our cavalry. With it, we will destroy them. Their hills will be drunk with their blood, and their plains filled with their corpses. Not even their footsteps will survive. They will be completely wiped out. So says King Nebuchadnezzar, Lord of the whole world, for he has spoken, and his commands will not be in vain."
What verse did you just end?
I just finished verse 4.
Okay.
That's pretty
Right.
intense.
Yeah,
huh?
definitely. I think we've seen that exact imagery before.
Yeah, I think something like it, at least.
So, I mean, I'm going to make a few notes here.
Mm.
So, Holofernes' tent is mentioned for the first time, but it will be the dramatic setting for many of the dialogues to come, and especially for the meeting. Yeah, especially for the meeting of Holofernes and Judith. The meeting is called a council, Synedrion, a term elsewhere for Holofernes meetings, unlike the Gerousia, used for the city council meeting of the high priest in Jerusalem. The term Suner. Oh, I got this. I'm reading the Greek here. Synedrion is the Greek word from which the Hebrew Sanhedrin is derived. But in Greek usage, it usually means meeting, and especially war council, as it does here in verse 2. Mercenaries of a frame is an odd expression. A frame appears in some of the lists of the northern tribes of Israel, but the term also came to be used to represent the northern tribes as a whole. In Holofernes' mouth, it is likely a sarcastic attempt to associate Achior the Ammonite with the people he appears to be championing. As noted above, it is another use of an archaic term to recreate the golden age of heroes and villains of Israelite history. The term mercenaries, mistotoi, might also be better translated more contemptuously as hirelings or hired workers, representing the class hierarchy of honor and shame that would have prevailed at this time.
So, Ephraimite mercenaries, if the reading's correct, which is highly debatable, the allusion is vague. It may be a term of contempt, possibly reflecting a southern bias against the north.
That's what that would sound like, because if they're mercenaries, but they're specifically from a frame, it would make sense that this is like
Right.
Jab.
Or, less likely, mistotoi may represent, as in the Septuagint of Isaiah 28:1, a misreading of SKWR, drunk, as SKYR, mercenary.
Okay, so that's the Hebrew transliteration.
So there's more notes here on this section. Playing the prophet. Unlike the reader, Holofernes never learned how ironic his words were. Achior is an Ammonite.
Oh,
Balaam.
Oh, that Holofernes.
Yeah, a Gentile who might speak only good about Israel. So like Balaam. In fact, the Ammonite Achior might quite literally have been based upon Elam, son of Beor, a seer who, as we now know from the Deir Allah inscriptions.
Yes, I actually, I posted some of that, like at least part of that, on our Patreon actually.
Mm-hmm. So he played an important role.
So if you want to see those, they're still there.
In the Ammonite literary traditions from at least 700 BC. Located in southern Transjordan, Deir Allah is within the area that scholars have generally assigned to the Ammonites. These Aramaic texts, written in black and occasionally red ink on white plaster, are quite fragmentary and pose a number of problems. Nonetheless, just as Balaam of Deir Allah brought his people to a communication from the gods, so later on another Ammonite, Achior, tried to enlighten his people about the nature and will of Israel's God. Also, on their God won't save them, the assertion turns out to be valid here, as it was when it was made earlier by Sennacherib's envoys to Hezekiah. So, there you go. That's the notes that I have so far. Anyways, as for you, Achior, you Ammonite mercenary, who has said these things in your day of insults.
Now calling him an Ammonite mercenary.
Yeah, can't make up his mind. Day of insults. You shall not again see my face from this day until I take revenge on this nation which came out of Egypt. When I return, then the sword of my army and the spear of my servants will run you through, and you shall fall among their wounded. My servants will now deliver you to the hill country and leave you at one of the towns in the passes. You will not die until you are destroyed with them. And if you, in your heart you believe that they won't be taken, then don't look so depressed. I have spoken, and not one of my words will fail to come true. Then Holofernes ordered those servants who waited on him in his tent to seize Achior and take him away to Bethulia and hand him over to the Israelites. So his servants seized him and took him out of the camp into the plain, and from the plain they went up into the hill country and came to the springs below Bethulia. As soon as the men of the town saw them, they grabbed their weapons and went out of town to the top of the hill, and all the slingers were pelting them with stones to prevent them from coming up, but ducking under the hill. Holofernes' men tied Achior up, left him at the foot of the hill, and returned to their lord.
So just left him for dead. So the description of these servants depositing Achior at the foot of the hill on which Bethulia sat, and the Bethulians admitting him to their town, takes up a considerable number of verses, more verses, in fact, than some of the military campaigns of the first two chapters.
So, also, the Vulgate adds that he's tied up to a tree by his hands and feet, which may reflect a reading in Jerome's Aramaic text.
Okay. What verse did you just finish?
I just finished verse 13.
Okay. You can continue, actually.
Okay. When the Israelites came down from their town and found him, they untied him and took him back to Bethulia and brought him before the magistrates of their town, who at the time were Uzziah, son of Micah, from the tribe of Simeon, Chabris, son of Gothoniel, and Charmis, son of Melchiel. It also might be Chalmes, depending on which thing you have.
There's nothing.
Text.
There's nothing really on any of these people. So.
Oh, there isn't.
Not in these two books.
Well, Ozias, is the Greek equivalent of the Hebrew. Yahoo is my strength. Given the attitude and performance of Uzziah later on, his name is most ironic. Weak and wavering, he is the perfect foil for the widow Judith and the Gentile Achior. Not only Uzziah and Judith, but presumably most of the inhabitants of Bethulia were Simeonites. The designation of Uzziah, Judith, and her husband as Simeonites is curious. like others of the so-called 12 tribes of Israel. So-called 12 tribes. Simeon's location changed drastically over the centuries. On the basis of such passages as Genesis 34, scholars generally understood the secular tribe of Simeon, along with Levi, to have once lived in central Palestine, in the general vicinity of Shechem. Moreover, the fact that Simeon's name heads the list of those standing on Mount Gerizim near Shechem, blessing the Israelites as they pass between it, and on Mount Ebal, so as Deuteronomy 27:12-13, seems to confirm that location. However, the Simeonites were evidently unable to maintain either their power or their location. The tribe became so insignificant that it was mentioned in neither the Song of Deborah nor the blessings of Moses. Moreover, Judges 1:17 places the Simeonites to the south of Judah in Zepta/Hormah, about 3 miles east of Beersheba. Simeon's later history was that of Judah. In fact, the list of Simeon's cities in Joshua 19:1-8 is actually the towns of Judah in the days of King Josiah. While the New Testament occasionally gives tribal designations to certain individuals, e.g., the prophetess Anna was from the tribe of Asher, Barnabas was out of Levi, and the apostle Paul was a Benjamite, such a designation represented the general area from which these people descended, rather than their actual tribal bloodline. Thus, although Simeonites would have lived in southern Palestine when Judith was composed, the author had in mind the setting for his story, the tribe's ancient patriarchal location, for in those days, Shechem not only stood between Jerusalem and the army of Holofernes, but was also the site of an event which loomed large in the minds of Judith, namely the rape of Dinah.
There's some interesting commentary on these sections, but yeah, I found it kind of interesting that they dropped them off here.
Yeah.
Out of all possible places. Ehrman's commentary notes that the ease with which Holofernes slaves infiltrate Israel's territory seems to vindicate the low opinion Holofernes and his officers have of Israel's military capabilities. If Israel's defenses can be penetrated so easily, who can save Israel from the might of Nebuchadnezzar? So yeah, I was wondering, why here of all places?
Yeah.
All right.
Anyways, let's continue. So they're talking about these people. These called together all the elders of the town, and all their young men and their women came hurrying to the assembly. They stood Achior in the center of all the people, and Uzziah questioned him about what had happened. He answered that by relating to them the decisions of Holofernes' war council that he himself had said in the presence of the Assyrian leaders, and how Holofernes had boasted of what he would do to the house of Israel. Then the people prostrated themselves in worship of God and cried out, "Lord God of heaven, consider their arrogance and pity the sorry plight of our nation. Look kindly this day on those consecrated to you." They then reassured Achior and commended him highly, not lightly. The exact opposite of that.
Yeah, good job, Ruben.
Yeah, okay, Christopher.
That was a light comment.
No.
Compliment. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a light response. Uzziah took from him the assembly to his own people and gave a banquet for the elders. And throughout that night, they called upon the God of Israel for help.
So the word that's used there for banquet is potos, which
Yes.
is literally a drinking party.
Yes, Steinman wrote, "The banquet which the mayor of Bethulia offers to Achior resembles strikingly the last cigarette of a man condemned to death."
Oh.
More likely, however, it was simply a meal where quite naturally wine was served. In any event, this potos was actually the setting for an all-night prayer session.
See, I like the idea of having just a rager.
Yeah.
All night prayer.
That's more common than you'd think.
Yeah, man, we'll all get together.
And we'll pray.
We'll pray. and it'll be swell, man. We can pray all night, man.
All night long.
Wow.
Here's some commentaries for you.
Okay, here's the book.
Okay. So now we are going on to the last chapter of the day, chapter 7. And this section is titled Holofernes Begins an Effective Siege Against Bethulia. And this is one chapter before we actually get to meet Judith. Because she's still not here. But she's coming. She's coming.
And I love it when our main character enters 2/3 into the presentation.
Yeah, you know, it's the best.
Yeah, so basically we're in these first 5 verses. We're going to get an advancement of his troops. They're going to mention spring, which will be relevant later.
You know, it's kind of weird to me. They just dropped this guy off, and then they went back just so they could go back.
Yeah. Well, they sent like an envoy of like 2 people.
Right. But like I'm saying that like I'm assuming these people are going to be doing something too. So it just sucks for them, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, it sucked for the people who Moses sent into
Obviously. Okay, but I'm just saying very inefficient.
Yeah. And by spring, I don't mean the season spring. I mean like a spring. A spring is going to be important here.
Okay.
That's right. That curved or the long dangly thing like a slinky.
No.
Obviously. You know, they had slinkies back in those days.
Yep.
Did they?
No.
Well, it doesn't seem that far-fetched. Just throwing it out there.
Do you have any idea how obnoxious it would be using ancient technology to make something as useless as a slinky?
They had all that time on their hands in
Yeah.
the ancient world. They weren't, up to surviving. That wasn't in their plans.
No, they had time to make slinkies. But no time to make food.
Exactly. All right. So, I don't have any introductory notes on this, so I can just hop into the readings then. Chapter 7.
You know what? A slinky
Oh, my God.
was invented by Richard James in the early 1940s.
Okay, well, we knew it wasn't in the ancient world.
Come on, man.
Yeah, but it's actually much more recent than I thought it would be. 1940s.
Okay. So the next day, Holofernes ordered his entire army and all the people who had joined him as allies to break camp and move on Bethulia and to seize the passes up into the hill country and so make war against the Israelites. So every able-bodied man of them marched off that day, and the strength of their fighting force was 170,000 infantrymen and 12,000 cavalry, not counting the baggage train and the men who managed it, an enormous number. So some comments on all these numbers, and although I wanted to, I guess they have something specifically for baggage, which is makes sense, but I wouldn't have thought that would have been there, I guess.
While you're reading that, I'll be right back.
Fair enough. So 170,000. If this figure is not corrupt, they have a textual note on the figure. Okay, let's see. Oh boy. Okay, so 170,000. So the Septuagint has 8,000. The Syriac has 172,000. The Vulgate in the Old Latin has 120,000. And then for the 12,000 cavalry, the Syriac and the Old Latin and the Vulgate have 22,000. So, all right then. All these different versions with their different numbers. Great. Okay. So either way, if this figure is not corrupt, then Holofernes has evidently picked up from his allies an additional 50,000 infantrymen. Cross-reference 215. In the Septuagint, errors in numbers are especially easy to make when some manuscripts, such as the Septuagint, use alphabetic symbols for the numbers instead of spelling it out in full. Yeah, so gematria, basically. All right, let's continue. They encamped in the valley near Bethulia, beside the spring, and they developed on a wide front from Dothan to Belbaim, and in depth from Bethulia to Siaman. Or it's actually almost spelled Siaman. So
See you, man.
let's take a look at some of these places here. So Belbaim, almost every Greek manuscript and ancient version offers a different spelling for this town. Most scholars assume that it is the same town as the unknown one mentioned in 4:4. I wish this was in the Greek, because that would be very helpful. Maybe it's Kuamon. That's my guess. Meaning bean field in Greek. The site is unknown, although many scholars identify it with Tel Kaimon, and that's equivalent to Jokmeam in 1 Kings 4:12 on the eastern slope of Mount Carmel, about 15 miles northwest of Jezreel. So, for context, I suppose. Which faces Esdraelon. When the Israelites saw this horde, they were quite alarmed and said to one another, "They will now strip clean the entire land. Neither high mountains nor valleys nor hills will bear their weight." After getting their weapons and lighting beacons on their towers, they stood on guard all that night.
What verse are you on right now?
Just finished verse 5.
Okay.
Yeah, so they stood on guard that whole night, which is weird because you assume they'd already see them. So were they just like circling them all night or something?
They stood on guard. They were...
Or were they just literally just defending? Like
Could be monitoring the situation.
I suppose, but seems like they would have attacked or something. I don't know. So either way, they're all night.
Well, you wait until you've developed a position.
What I'm saying is that if they thought that the military was so weak, they didn't have to spend too much time thinking about it because they just walked in last time.
You ever play Civilization?
No.
Oh. Well, when you're playing Civilization, even in the early game, you really do want to surround your enemy's cities and not just like throw some fighters off to walk in there and get killed, and then by the time
if you are so like I don't know how the whole game works, right? But like if you are like a whole bunch of levels ahead and and they lagged for the first half of the game or something and couldn't do anything, got no progress, don't barely have an army. Like, you can just go in there at some point.
there's still city defenses, you'd lose.
But you have to build those, right?
Well, at a certain point.
Well, demonstrably through history, if
There's-
someone has the technological edge, it really doesn't matter if they had some other strategy. The technological edge can completely overwhelm it to the point where no one on one side dies and everyone on the other side dies.
Yeah, like there's
It's over. It's
I mean,
it's
look,
very
if you're
lopsided.
flying over them with low orbit ion cannons.
Hey, careful with
then-
those.
Yeah,
those are
there's-
powerful.
There's a big difference there, but like think about Vietnam, man. Right?
sure.
We definitely had a technically stronger
That is
military.
true. That is true.
And
But then we just didn't know the terrain or anything at
Nobody
all.
use those low orbiting ion cannons. That's the reason.
yeah,
All right, let's continue on. I'm just saying from the narrative, it didn't make much sense. It just seems like they would have just straight up attacked. On the second day, Holofernes deployed his entire cavalry in full view of the Israelites who were in Bethulia. See, right there. Like, it's like, I don't really care if you know what's coming. I'll get you anyways.
well, it's not that. He's intentionally showing off.
Right. So, like, he's not too worried. That was kind of the point I was getting across. Okay.
It's an intimidation move.
Yes, I get that.
You could shoot someone directly with that cannon from space, but you could shoot near them and then they go, whoa.
It's like in Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah.
When Eggman shoots the Eclipse cannon at the moon as a warning shot and then demands total control over the Earth.
See, I didn't play that, so
Oh man,
Never
you're
do
missing
anything
out.
fiction.
yes.
WWE is fiction.
Yes.
Real fiction.
Real fiction. Uh,
That fake fiction.
so either way, he's coming down with a whole bunch of people. He reconnoitered the approaches to their town. He found the water sources, seized them, and after posting detachments of soldiers over them, he returned to his main army.
Yeah, so these are the springs, right?
Yeah.
You cut off the natural resources that are available to your enemy.
Infrastructure.
Yes.
All the rulers of the children of Esau, horrible, the leaders
Yeah,
of
so
the people of Moab and the generals of the coastal region then came to him and said, if our master will listen to our advice, then his army will suffer no losses.
the children of Esau are the Edomites, joining the neighborly groups with whom Israel had to dicey relations in the past are the chieftains of the Edomites. This is another group who would have had ancient bad associations for the Israelites. The progenitor of the Edomites was Esau,
Yeah.
whose animosity towards Jacob was considered to be indicative of the relations between their progeny. There was a more recent association, however, in that the author's day, the Edomites were known as Idumeans, and John Hyrcanus had forcibly converted many of this group to Judaism.
We covered, so I do remember the Idumeans coming in to play in Maccabees, right?
Mm.
But I also remember the very lengthy discussion in Jubilees
Mhm.
and
And Genesis.
well, yeah. But I don't know. For some reason, Jubilees was much more
It stands out.
vivid about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Continue.
For this people, the Israelites, do not rely on their spears, but on the height of the mountains where they live, since it is no easy task to get to the top of their mountains. So now, master, don't fight them in a pitched battle, and not a single man of your army will fall. Remain in camp and keep all your men with you while your servants take possession of the spring which flows from the foot of the mountain, because it is from there all the people of Bethulia get their water. So thirst will destroy them, and they will surrender their town.
Yeah, so they not only have taken the other springs that are in the area, now they're directly taking the water supply for Bethulia. So they're gonna
Yeah, supply chains are key during sieges.
Yeah.
they're gonna be screwed. You gotta drink water, man. You
Uh,
will die
yes.
if you don't.
That is accurate. So thirst will destroy them, and they will surrender their town. Meanwhile, we and our people will go up onto the surrounding hilltops and camp there, so as to prevent any man from leaving the town. They and their women and children will starve, and before the sword touches them, they will be lying in the streets outside their homes. So you will make them pay dearly for rebelling against you and for not being conciliatory. Rebelling against you, I don't think these ones really did much, did they?
No, they really didn't.
Yeah, they really. I don't know.
Well, they threw rocks at the
Oh,
people who
right.
came before. I
Right,
guess.
right. Oh, just yeah, ridiculous. Yeah, no notes on that section there.
Like how in modern Israel, all those Palestinian children throw rocks at the tanks.
Yeah. How could they throw rocks at those tanks?
With their
course.
arms from the ground.
They have to have their little rebellion crushed by,
Yeah. We could go on about that for a very long time.
indefinitely.
Because this advice was agreeable to Holofernes and his entire staff, he ordered it to be done just as they had recommended. So a contingent of Ammonites, along with 5,000 Syrians, moved forward. They encamped in the valley and secured the Israelites' water sources and springs. So that was the end of verse 17 there.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to check for any notes here. The Vulgate for verse 17 here has, and he placed all around about 100 men at every spring. So, there's the addition there. How many people? All right.
The point being that they're securing the water sources.
Yes. Verse 18. Meanwhile, the children of Esau and the Ammonites went up and encamped in the hill country opposite Dothan, and they sent some of their number to the southeast toward Agrabel, which is near Choas, on the Wadi Mukmer.
Yeah, so
Lots of places there. Okay.
the localities mentioned in verse 18
Yes.
have all been identified with sites in the vicinity of Shechem, which has led some scholars to suggest that Bethulia may be a pseudonym for Shechem.
And apparently, actually, Choas's location is unknown, although some scholars would identify it with the modern village of Kuzeth, which is about 6 miles south of Nablus.
Mm-hmm.
And the wadi, possibly to be identified with Wadi Makafurle, south of Nablus, but identified by Avi Yonah and Aharoni with Wadi Kana. And of course, wadi just means like valley, river.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So, the rest of the Assyrian army encamped in the plain and covered every square inch of it. Their tents and supplies formed an immense encampment, since they constituted such a very great number. The Israelites then cried out to the Lord their God, for their courage had failed them, because all their armies had surrounded them. All their enemies had surrounded them. And there was no escape from them. The entire Assyrian army, the infantry, chariots, and cavalry, had blockaded them for 34 days, and all the water reserves were depleted for all the inhabitants of Bethulia. The cisterns were going dry, and no one could quench his thirst for even a day because the water had to be rationed. Their children were listless, and the women and young men fainted from thirst and were collapsing in the town's streets and gateways, for they no longer had any strength. So all the people, including the young men, women, and children, gathered around Uzziah and the town leaders and shouted in protest. And in the presence of all the elders, they said, "May God judge between you and us. For you did us a great injustice by not making peace with the Assyrians. We have no one to help us now. Rather, God has sold us into their hands to sprawl before them in thirst and utter helplessness. Contact them at once and hand over the whole town to be sacked by Holofernes' people and his army. For it is better for us to be sacked by them. For although we shall become slaves, our lives will be spared, and we shall not witness with our eyes the death of our little ones or our wives and children breathing their last. We call to witness against you, heaven and earth, and our God, the Lord of our ancestors, who punishes us for our sins and for the sins of our fathers, that you do what we have said today."
So the Bethulians complained to Uzziah, much as the Israelites complained to Moses during the Exodus. In Exodus 15 through 17, there are 3 episodes in which the Israelites seem to have quickly forgotten God's former miracles and complain about their new trials. See also Deuteronomy 6:16. One of these episodes, Exodus 17, 1 through 7, contains several parallels to the book of Judith. If we also look ahead to Judith's reaction to this scene, the text tells a similar story. There's a lack of water. The Israelites complain to their leader and say it would have been better to be a slave. There's a critique of their testing of God.
That's the whole water from the rock thing, right?
Mm-hmm. The leader calls on God. The leader delivers the people, and there's an issue over the acclamation, the Lord is with us. A crucial difference is that the function of the leader in Judith is divided between Uzziah and Judith. She steps up here to take the role of leader from the recognized male authority in the community, which will happen soon.
Yeah.
But we're not quite there yet.
All right. So, the people are now just they are fed up with it. They want water.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they want. So they're ready to give up the place.
The women and children are collapsing in the streets.
Yeah, they are. Then there arose a bitter and general lamentation throughout the assembly, and they cried loudly to the Lord God. Uzziah then said to them, "Courage, my brothers. Let us hold out for 5 more days. 5 more days."
You need water.
Yes, you do.
You're going to
Please.
die.
Is this not like an arid area? hot?
It is. I'm assuming. Yes.
Yeah,
Presumably. Yes.
That's no good. You need that more then.
So not good. Bad idea, buddy. Let us hold out for 5 more days. By then, the Lord our God will have pity on us, for he will not abandon us altogether. But if these days go by and no help comes to us, then I will do as you say, when it'll be too late and more people die.
Yeah, so they're talking about rain, to be clear.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay. He then dismissed the men to their various stations. They went on the walls and towers of their towns and sent the women and children to their homes. But throughout the town, they were very dejected. I assume they were, yes.
So now they have this calm before the storm. So, section, the third scene, and Act 1 ends with the Israelites waiting, but waiting in a great misery rather than hope. Whatever hope Achior's prophetic faith may have kindled has been extinguished by subsequent events.
Oh, no.
And that is the end of the first half of Judith.
Yeah, and then the next half, we actually get to talk about Judith.
What? No way.
Yeah.
The thing's named after is finally discussed.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of like
The titular character.
you know, in those stories where they're like gonna fight a big monster or something, they do this whole thing where they set up this thing is ravaging their communities and stuff, and then some rando in cowboy boots is like laying back and he's like, "Well, I'll kill it if and you can pay me my due."
Right.
Right? It just like happens in the middle of the movie. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
The Deus Ex.
Yep.
Everyone loves those guys.
It's like in Jaws, where they get the guy, ship captain, and then like pretty much immediately, once the ship captain takes the people and go out, the captain gets killed. But yeah, presumably Judith will not get killed. She'll probably survive.
I don't know. We'll
Based
find
on
out.
all of the artwork of her holding this dude's head.
She does kill a person. That will happen. But
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like for 3 seconds that she holds the head and then dies immediately after.
I suppose
Come
we'll
on.
see. I haven't read Judith,
Some
so I
spawn-
suppose we'll see.
Spawn camping snipers are just waiting.
Yep.
Yeah, there they are.
So that's reading for the day. What
Yeah.
did you think of Act 1?
It started off kind of dull, but I like the ending there with the battle. Well, it wasn't really a battle; they just kind of took over.
I approve of
And now the people
realism.
complaining.
The realism in the sense, not all over the place, but at least in terms of battle tactics, they're doing things that you would say, this won't immediately fail. This will probably succeed. That good strats.
Yeah, let's just take away all their water.
It works. It's evil, but it works.
And before I forget, Landon will be on the show on Sunday.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I think he was already on this month, but he's got something happening where he won't be able to be on next month, so we're getting him on.
Excellent. Well,
Double up.
we'll
Some
be
extra
talking
Landon.
about Ezekiel.
Yeah, we will. Going to be continuing that. That's exciting.
Now, where are we in Ezekiel?
Let's find out.
We're in We're gonna be reading what, like 3-4 chapters?
Did we do 3 or 4? I forget how many we did.
Yeah, well, we're on like either chapter 8, 9, 10, or 11 right now. We're somewhere in there. But yeah, Ezekiel on Sunday. Be prepared.
Yeah, and then let's see. So Ezekiel's not. We're gonna be in for a little while, right? Because it is kind of long in comparison to the upcoming.
It is literally more than half of the remaining pages of the Bible that we're going to be reading before we get to the New Testament.
I think it's just about the same, honestly.
No, I counted the pages.
Oh, you did? Okay, then. All right, then. Well, quite long. And then we get into Daniel. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
so
and after Daniel, we just got some shorties.
Yeah, some very short prophets.
Yep.
Like they're 4'2" at the tallest.
Yes.
People were shorter back then.
Either way, thank you everyone for joining us. Please drop a like if you enjoyed the video and drop a dislike if you did not. Subscribe if you haven't for whatever reason.
And tell us all of your thoughts, in the comment section. Our videos will do better if you comment in the comment section. So give us your complete
undivided attention.
Yeah. Tell us all your thoughts about the first act of Judith in the comment section.
Definitely want to hear those thoughts.
Everything that you think about them.
Let's see. What do we have going on?
Got a Patronin for $1.
Yes, we have a Patreon. Because of course we do. Link is in the description, and you can get video scripts for that's $1 a month. And you know what? This week I'm coming out with a video on kind of like the evolution of Passover,
the Pesach.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna mess up so many pronunciations. I guarantee it. Of all the Hebrew.
Well, you should learn Hebrew.
Yeah, I suppose that is.
In fact, you should learn ancient Hebrew.
That is the plan eventually.
You better not some ancient Jews. Maybe that'll help.
You better not pronounce your wows as vobs.
I'll see what I can do. So, let's see. We got that coming out, so there will be a script for that, obviously. Let's see. You can get entered into t-shirt giveaways. You can be on the show. Lots of stuff on there. So link is in the description for that. We also have an Amazon wish list with a lot of fantastic books. So if you want us to cover a subject, you can just go ahead and order us a book on it. It's on the wish list, probably the one that you're thinking of right now. So, feel free to get that. We'll read it. It'll either be on this table as a commentary, if it's a commentary, or it's going to be source material for something that we put out.
Speaking of books, you remember when your teacher didn't know what the Wisdom of Solomon is?
Yeah, that was tough. I was like, what?
Got that 666 donation drive.
Yeah, nobody's gonna donate to it right now.
Not a good time. Do it next time.
Yeah, but speaking of books, you can get yourself a copy of According to Your Evidence, Unicorns
You
Exist.
could. I don't suggest it, but you could. You could just go to the Teespring. You know what? In fact, we have a lot of great shirts. In fact,
Chris, pin a shirt on the chat.
Yeah,
pin it there. Do it. There you go. It's pinned.
The Drive
it's
666
now. You can see it, people.
Yeah,
I think.
They can. It's going to take a little bit there for us, but
it's still spinning. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
it's there. You can see it.
We got fantastic shirts on there. If you don't want to take your chances with the t-shirt giveaway.
Yeah, but if you do want to take your chances because gambling is fun. And you can do that on Patreon.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't. Do we have something else? Facebook and Twitter. Free to follow us on there.
Email. Have an email.
Yeah, I suppose you could email us at MilwaukeeAtheists@gmail.com.
Lawrence's address is.
Yeah, your home address.
Not.
Your social security number.
Your mother's maiden name.
Yeah, just help everyone out.
Oh, all right. Yeah, no problem.
Yep.
My address is 69420 Mockingbird Lane.
Wow. I believe you.
I thought it was 123 Fake Street.
No.
Evergreen Terrace, Springfield.
I remember that. No, I think my address is way better. So,
Anyways,
yeah, that's the show. I hope you
You've
enjoyed it.
seen the show.
And we will see you on Sunday. Landon's going to be there.
And then next Friday.
Yeah.